Please welcome to the stage President and CEO of Oglethorpe Power Corporation, Mike Smith.
Experiences, so we did that, and we thought a fun theme would be to do it in the form of a football game, and kind of fits here with your conference and your speaker last night. So this is something that we did a little bit of about a year ago, and it seemed to be well received there. We've been kind of doing what we call a road show. A number of statewides have asked us to come out and talk about our experiences. So we're happy to be here in Ohio and happy to share our experiences with you. The first thing you need to know before we enter the game is that when you go into a big project like this, you need to have scale and scope. You need to be big in order to do big projects that are really going to test your balance sheet. So just a few things on Oglethorpe. We do have a very large scale and scope. Right now, even though that slide says 8,500 megawatts, we're about 9,300 megawatts. And we just announced some new construction that by 2029, we're going to be over 10,100 megawatts. About $16 billion in assets. We have 38 generating units, and we have a huge member base. We, as you know, in Georgia, are a partial requirements provider. We do not provide all of the energy to our members. We provide about 60 to 65%. So even with our scale, when you look at our members overall, you can see that they are quite large. They have about 42 million megawatt hours of sales annually. They have an annual peak that goes over north of 11,000 megawatts. And they are strong EMCs. 38 EMCs own Oglethorpe Power, and really the cornerstone of our credit is the quality and the scale of our members. So let's get into the game. We're at kickoff. We're back in 2005, about getting close to be 20 years ago, but we're in 2005, and we're talking about the state of the energy industry. And President Bush at that time signs the Energy Policy Act of 2005, incenting a revitalization of nuclear, tax credits, loan guarantees, et cetera. We're one of many projects on the drawing board. We like what we hear about the way the federal government is going to support the program, and we like the streamlined processing of permitting that we're seeing at the NRC. We do have prior experience. We are already owners of 4 nuclear units at other sites, Vogtle 1 and 2 and Hatch 1 and 2. So we feel like there may be something here. And we're hearing about this new modular design at Westinghouse, much more efficient construction and installation. Seems to be that we're going to be able to streamline the construction. What really gets us interested in this is diversifying our portfolio, or I should say continuing the diversification of the portfolio. We're looking at a future where we're growing. We're looking at a future where we see a lot of the growth. If we don't add nuclear, it's going to be focused in on natural gas. And we look at where natural gas had trended up to that 2005 date, and we're really saying we need to worry about that. Gas prices were very high, and we did want to get something on the nuclear side. Now, we knew when you go into a nuclear project, it's not a short construction cycle. It's a long construction cycle. It's probably double or triple what the construction cycle is on any other type of generating asset, and it's going to cost a lot more, but it's going to run 365, 24/7 for 60 to 80 years. So you've got to have a long view. You've got to have the understanding at the G&T that you're going to hold this on your balance sheet for a long time, because the members are going to pay for it over those 60 to 80 years through their depreciation rate. So you're the one at the G&T that has to carry the debt load and has to have the liquidity during construction to build this. And so we embarked on it. It was going to be about $6,000 per kW. So at the start, we knew this is going to be expensive, but it's a 60 to 80 year asset running constantly. We also knew that it's going to take a while. We're back in '05, and we knew that permitting is not a 90-day process, it's a 3 to 4 year process when you're talking about a nuclear plant. So at the most optimistic, you can see that our original date for this to come on was going to be 10 to 11 years later. One unit was going to come on in 16, and one unit was going to come on in 17 of 2000. And we had not even crossed, well, I'll get to it later. So we're in the first quarter, the game has started, and we have what we call the first fumble. It wasn't our fumble, but it was certainly a fumble that affected our game, and we call that the Fukushima fumble. Fukushima is a Japanese nuclear plant. They have a tsunami over there. The plant is knocked out, and they are unable to operate the reactor controlling coolant system, and they release radiation. It's the perfect storm for the rest of us who are about to start a nuclear plant. So a lot of delay for us in terms of us and the NRC out there explaining how our plant is not Fukushima. We are not located on an ocean, so we're not going to have a tsunami. We're located on a river in the middle of Georgia. And more importantly is the new design. This is an old design, we're a new design. What failed here in terms of making it a worldwide incident was the fact they released radiation. Why weren't they able to cool the reactor and avoid that release of radiation? Because the cooling systems were run by diesel engines. Those diesel engines were not above tsunami flood levels. The tsunami flooded the diesel engines. They were not able to operate their cooling system. We said the new technology in nuclear is what we're putting in at Vogtle 3 and 4, and that is where your containment vessel, your nuclear reactor, has what's called a passive containment operation. It does not require a diesel engine nor any kind of engine to operate it because it operates by gravity. The containment is on top of the nuclear reactor vessel. When you see pictures, you'll see what looks like a pillbox hat on top of the reactor. That is borinated water that would be released in case of any type of an emergency and requires no mechanical operation, much like Fukushima did. So we were able, and with the help of the NRC, to push forward. And so we start digging at the site, and with a nuclear reactor vessel, before you build up, you got to dig down because you've got to dig a significantly deep basement, put in reinforced concrete and rebar and other protections against soil movements. Well, when we dug down, we found that the soil at the site was not quite nuclear ready. It was deemed to be too soft. So what was originally planned to be a minor excavation turned into a major excavation. We actually had to replace enough soil that we created an artificial mountain out there off the site called Plant Vogtle, which I will show you pictures of later. So a little bit of a rough start before you even get the first pouring of cement out there. But things were also looking up in terms of getting streamlined permitting. We got DOE loan support, which was as good as RUS support in terms of effective rates. We were in a low interest rate environment. We were working with the members on how we can potentially smooth this into rates over time, the impact of the initial project hitting. But at the site, we were seeing construction problems. We had a fixed price contract with Westinghouse and Shaw, guaranteed, ironclad. We only pay on milestones, and we only pay X on milestones. And so watching for scope changes, watching for everything else, but until you hit a milestone, you don't get paid, and you, Shaw and Westinghouse, take all the risk, not us. Well, we learned a lot about the security of having an ironclad fixed price contract. We start seeing vendor angst. They're struggling. They're not hitting milestones, so we're not paying them. And they're like, we really don't like this contract. And we're like, but you signed it and it's ironclad. And so we said, we're going to hold you, we're going to hold you, we're going to hold you. Westinghouse and Shaw are bleeding. They are taking a bath. Billions of dollars of incurred costs. And of those billions of dollars of incurred costs, they can only charge us what was contractually agreed to in the contract. And they are way underwater. They are in trouble, and we are sensing this could really be bad. This may be too bad. So we actually sat with them and said, let's try to restructure the deal a little bit. Before that went anywhere, they declared bankruptcy. Westinghouse, a company that is 131 years old, declares bankruptcy, and Toshiba, the parent of Westinghouse, 142 years old, almost declares bankruptcy. I can tell you Toshiba had a parent guarantee on this project of $5 to $6 billion. Had they not been able to pay that, I don't know that we would have been able to go forward with the project. But because of the fact that when Westinghouse went bankrupt, Toshiba did honor a parent guarantee, we felt like, well, let's look at this and see, do we want to pick this project up, and do we want to go naked, basically completing it ourselves with the help of Southern Nuclear, taking all of the construction and price risk. And our members were not so confident that they wanted to do that. We, of the owners, and we're roughly 30%, Southern Company is just under 50%, and the cities are 20%. But the cities have laid off their risk. They knew that they didn't need the power out of Vogtle for the first 20 years. So they went out and did deals with JEA in Florida, Power South in Alabama. They laid off the first 20 years, and so they said, we're in great shape, and they were in great shape because of the ability to defer the impact of the cost. We knew Southern and Georgia Power were going to go forward. We brought in Southern Nuclear, a room like this, to explain their confidence in taking over the project, and boy, were they hit hard by the members. The members were livid over the performance of Westinghouse to date. They were livid over the status of the project. They hammered them, and they hammered them good. These were intelligent questions that really, in the long run, proved to be pretty accurate. And most of the lines of questions were, how confident are you in your own ability to budget for this project and your own ability to oversee the execution? And they really weren't getting answers that they were overly confident in. And so we were in the midst of this evaluation, do we go forward or not? And I get a call from the governor of the state, Governor Deal, come down here, I want to speak to you. Go down to his office, and we talk, and he's like, look, everybody else is ready to go forward. Where are the cooperatives? And I said, we're analyzing the situation. You know we represent rural Georgia. You know we have no ability to lay off cost increases to shareholders. It all goes to the rural Georgian. And you know the status of this project and the success to date. So we're evaluating. He said, Mike, we want to see this project go forward. It's important to the state. It's important to our reputation. And by the way, you all aren't Public Service Commission regulated, are you? And I said, no, the co-ops are not Public Service Commission regulated. And he said, well, maybe y'all would have less difficulty making choices or decisions if you were Public Service Commission regulated. So I said, that's noted. And I took it back to the members, and I said, boys and girls, this is the meeting, and this is what we're being asked to do. And they felt the pressure, and they said, well, that certainly is an added feature that we need to take into consideration as we make the determination of whether or not we're going to go forward. So long story short, obviously we go forward, but we tell Southern Company, you're giving us a new budget, you're giving us a new schedule. We want to have the ability to revisit this decision. For example, if you go over your revised budget by another $1 billion, we can get back together and vote on this again. If you take any of these dollars to shareholders and don't take it to your rate base, we can get back and revisit this decision. We put these things in, they're called project adverse events. Southern says, sure, signs it, let's go. Why did they do that? 2 reasons. Number one, the sense, the arrogance, we're never going to hit these things. And then number 2, if we hit them, you're going to get called down to the governor's office and you're going to come with us again. Basically, we know where this is going. We're the IOU, you're the cooperative. So, no more fixed price contract. We revised the budget and we put it up to Southern, and now we've got Bechtel in to take over construction, and we go forward with the co-owner and schedule risk. Less than a year later, that budget, where we get a revisit the decision, if it's projected to be $1 billion over, is projected to be $3 billion over what they just revised. Less than a year later, every single category in the budget is busted. It's not a random event. We can tell we've been suckered by an unrealistic budget, and we're furious. And so we're like, PAE triggered. You all have exceeded the budget authority. We want to revisit whether or not we want to do this project. And so they say, okay, let's go through the process. By the way, while you're at that, we're triggering another PAE. And we said, what is that? And they said, this hit in the last 10 months, we're not taking any of it to the rate base. We're taking it all to the shareholders. Why? Because the PSC would crucify us if we don't. So we have a PAE that says you can't take $1, and they say they're taking their 50% of a $3 billion increase to the shareholders. And we're sitting there thinking all of that's going to go to our ratepayers. And so I go down to the governor's office. I don't wait to get invited. I go down there. And I said, can you believe I'm back here less than a year after our visit? And he said, why are you back here? This had not broken down at the Capitol yet. And I explained to him, what's going on and why I'm down here. And I said, Governor Deal, I remind you, we're not anything but rural Georgians, and all this cost goes to our members. And we're being asked to make another decision whether or not we're going to go forward. And he said, you're not a blank checkbook. That I flew out of there. I didn't walk out, I flew out saying, I've got the cover, we've got the cover. Went back to the members, we kicked it into high gear from a government relations standpoint. We went down, talked to everybody at the Capitol, Senate, and House. We went out to DC, talked to our senators, talked to our congresspeople saying, we feel that the IOU needs to provide protection to rural Georgians. We need to have cost caps if they continue with this lack of performance. You need to protect the rural Georgians. It caught on with the House caucus in the state, the rural caucus. There's about 20 people that make up the rural Georgia caucus. They said, would it help us if would it help you if we put some public pressure on them by signing a letter and sending it to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that they need to protect rural Georgians with the cost cap? We said, absolutely. We're not writing that letter, but if you want to do something like that, it certainly would help. They did that. It was front page coverage in the paper. Southern and Georgia Power didn't know any of that was coming. Immediately accused us of writing that letter and getting people to sign it, and we said we didn't write it. It was written on our behalf, and we were happy to see it done, but we didn't write it. So we quickly evolve into an out-and-out war. They start with the public pressuring. Oglethorpe uses its vote to try to burden others with its obligations and extract unreasonable concessions. We had already hired a PR firm. We're ready to blast right back. We go out there with, if anybody's being ridiculous and unreasonable here, it's you, the people that are building this plant that can't stick to a budget. And we go public. It's a public war in the paper, in the press, on the news channels. They call for a ceasefire. They said, let's not do this anymore. And we said, you started it. You started it, you hit us, and you expect the cooperative world not to hit back. We're hitting back. And they said, but you still got to vote. And let me make a key clarification about this round. In this round, we're not telling people we want to stop the project. We're telling people we want to continue the project, but we want cost protections. We do not want to see the project stopped. It's for the good of Georgia. It's for the good of economic development. We're so far along, we need to finish this, but enough's enough. They have got to protect rural Georgia, the way they're protecting their regulatory ratepayers, and we don't have shareholders, and they are the constructors, operators of this plant. They said, your answer needs to be yes or no. Are you going to go forward? So we have a board meeting where on the date that our answer is due, and our board says we are not voting to stop this project. We are voting to continue it, but we are going to put in a number of requirements. Yes, we want to go forward, but these things have to happen. And this is actually a piece of paper from a board meeting where we devised a series of cost bands where if they hit these cost bands, they would differentially pick up a share of our costs. Slap them on the hand. And if they go further, they pick up more costs. And if they go further, they pick up more costs. And then there becomes a level where we can freeze. We don't have to give any more money. But we understand that's maybe a little bit unreasonable in terms of just the pure amount of risk that we're flowing to them. So we say, we'll freeze our investment, but if you want to go forward, spend away and tell us later on what our net megawatts are. i.e., when we freeze, we'll take that level of investment in this project. But that's it. And if you spend a lot more, yeah, we're going to get diluted down, but we have put the last dollar into this project. So it's a freeze with a little bit of dilution. So the board likes this. It's due at midnight. We type it up. We send it over. Yes, but under these conditions. They come back immediately with, that's an illegal ballot. We said, what do you mean? And they said, you are required to say yes or no. And we said, our ballot says yes under these conditions. And they said, illegal ballot. And we said, the ballot speaks for itself. If you want to take it as a no, take it as a no. We're not going. If you want to take it as a yes, let's put these conditions in place. Hung up the phone. 2 hours later, they call back. They say, we want another 48 hours. We say, take your time. We're not going anywhere, but we're not changing our answer. And they're like, oh, you think you're not changing your answer. In the course of the next 48 hours, and I will love this man to death for the rest of my life, Senator Johnny Isakson, who has passed away, but he was our senior senator at the time, calls the CEO of Southern Company. Says, his name's Tom Fanning. Tom, what are you doing? Tom happened to be driving to the Sunday round at Eastlake of the Tour Championship where Southern was the host. And he was about to go on TV as the host of these tour tournaments do to talk about his wonderful company. Johnny said, oh, you're doing all that? Pull the car over. And so Tom says, I pulled the car over. What do you want? You're bleeping this up. And he didn't use the word bleep. He used the bad one. You're bleeping this up. Give the cooperatives what they want and what they need. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, yes, you do. You know what I'm talking about. Enough's enough. With the Southern Company attitude and arrogance, give the cooperatives what they want. It's more than reasonable that this is well beyond your current budget. You should feel the pain if you can't hit the numbers, and they should be allowed to stay in but freeze their costs at some point if they're willing to give you the extra megawatts. Do the deal. So this time he had to go back to his constituency the way I had to go back after my talk with the governor and say, political pressure, the deal needs to get done. So we are in a new world. We've got cost-sharing band agreements. They're like, oh, we'll never hit these bands. We've got, by the way, we get production tax credits at that time. We didn't have direct pay. And so they had to monetize all of our tax credits for us under this deal. And then to just keep them under budget oversight, we said you have to have KPMG in here working with you on your internal controls. So we feel like, okay, fixed it. We're in revival. Let's go forward. 2020. What happens in 2020? COVID. We've got peak workforce at the site, 7,000 workers. We are the largest construction project in the country. COVID hits. I will do a lot of Southern Company critiquing. Here, I will say, I've never been more impressed, amazed, satisfied with the way somebody handled something as I was with the way that Southern handled COVID. They knew we cannot lose the 7,000 workers. We have got to have this workforce stay here and continue with the effort. They put 7 medical trailers on site, scattered across the site. Anybody that felt anything could get tested, could get comfort, whether or not what they were dealing with, what had happened. Did we have some absenteeism? Absolutely. But we never had a site shut down for even half a day. We were concerned that we are going to, with 7,000 workers, we're going to overwhelm the local Augusta hospitals and they're going to force us to close down. Never happened. And those workers stayed, and had those workers left, they would have scattered to the winds. Other projects, other parts of the country, we could have never, we would have eventually been able to rebuild that, but with another significant delay. So COVID happened, really didn't impact the project. In fact, it was funny with them spacing out and kind of giving each other extra space and having fewer of the 7,000 there. I would argue that the productivity was actually better during COVID than it was in non-COVID times. Now they would challenge me on that, but I think the statistics back that up. But with all that said, construction challenges continue. What do we got going on now? We have installations where we forgot to put the brackets in. We left flanges in pipes. We've got the schedule's always had a little bit of a challenge in it, so it may not be as realistic as we thought. Southern starts trying to hit milestones so they can tell the public they've hit milestones, and they start doing things slightly out of order. Not good. When you cut corners and you start doing things slightly out of order, and Bechtel is sitting there telling you, I wouldn't do that if I were you, and Southern says, we're going to do it, it gets done. And that a lot of bit of that is leadership at the top, and I can say that because he's retired now, but Tom Fanning set the tone at that corporation. So guess what? Cost sharing bands we were never going to hit. The freeze level we were never going to hit them all. So we've said, Southern, we're freezing. You tell us how many megawatts we're going to get at the end of the day, and we are officially froze. They said, what are you talking about? We said, we're froze under the conditions of the settlement. They said, what settlement? We're like, that settlement that we both signed. And they're like, well, you're misreading that settlement. It doesn't work that way. And we're like, what? It's there on paper. It's black and white. We negotiated it. We know how it reads. We have your slides from when you went up to the credit rating agencies when we did the deal and how you explained it. And you explained it the way we say it works. And they said, doesn't work that way. We're not honoring it. And we're like, what is going on? And somebody at a lower level says they are scared to death to be perceived by their analysts as going naked on costs for the rest of this project, i.e. they've got all the exposure, runaway costs. They have to have their analysts believe that you all are still in there. And we're like, well, how smart are their analysts if they don't understand that we've got this agreement? And they said, you asked why we're doing it? That's the only thing we can come up with. Well, we're furious. We're like, we are pounding away publicly and in our analyst calls that we have, because we're SEC registered, exactly how the deal works, because we know how the deal works. And we go down to the courthouse when we can sue. The first day that we could sue for them violating this contract, we went down and sued them. And we said, you're dishonorable, and you're not living up to your word, and it's just shocking that you would treat us like this. So while all of that is going on, we're in contractual dispute, not really knowing whether or not we've got a completed project at a fixed cost with a cap or not, or even what our megawatts are. The first unit comes on. So unit 3 comes on in July 31st, 2023. I'm happy to say a lot of concern about when these things come on. Are they going to just turn them on and then we're going to have a series of derates and issues and outages? It has been the exact opposite of that. Unit 3 has been on since July 31st of last year and has had 1 3-day derate. One. The rest of the time, 24/7, 365. So when it came on, it performed every way that it should perform, and we couldn't be more pleased with that. We are also having to bring these units into our rates as they come on, but because of our scale and because of our rate management programs with the members, you can see it's barely noticeable to our wholesale rate to our members when those plants that are now, by the way, started off at a $4.2 billion budget, and we're projecting 8.3. So one project, one generating site, $8 billion. I said we're a $16 billion company. It's roughly half our balance sheet in these two units. But from a rate impact, because they're long-lived, because of the scale of our megawatts, because we're looking at 60 to 80 years, not the rate shock that people thought that we were going to see from this. So we're nearing the end. Unit 4 is about to come online, but we've still got this litigation, and we're deposing one another, and their people are not saying anything. They are just telling the attorneys, no comment, can't recollect. The best one was can't recollect, and a gentleman was actually, if I were to ask you to recollect what you had for breakfast this morning, would you be able to recollect? And he said, I doubt I would. So that's what their side had been set into depositions to say. And our attorney said, just wait. The lower level people get away with that stuff, but when you start deposing executives, the CFO, the CEO, the chairman of the board, what were your board conversations like? They said they'll never let it get to that. They'll never let those people be embarrassed by the fact that they know that they're lying, and they will never put themselves through that. And sure enough, when it came time and we deposed the senior executives, they called over and said, let's settle this. And they put it in the context of, don't you all want to get all your megawatts back? And we said, sure, we'd love to get our megawatts back. We know we're losing megawatts, but we're not going to pay you the Vogtle cost of those megawatts to get them back. If we were to build something, we'd build a CT or a combined cycle. Let's kind of factor in a cost like that, much cheaper cost. It made sense. They dwelled on it. They accepted it. What was the net impact of that? The net impact of that was we saved $450 million by fighting them throughout the course of this project. Almost $500 million of their money is in our pocket. Or another way of saying that is they paid for $450 million of our piece of the project for us. So we feel like it was a good thing to be combative and to go against them and try to do the right thing on behalf of rural Georgians that needed that protection. So where are we today? Both units are up and running. There is a picture of the reactor vessel, and I talked about the pillbox hat on top. That's all water up there, borinated water. If there's ever a reaction inside that you need to cool down, that water will be released out of that tank and coat the walls interior to the unit enough to, I believe it offers about 4 days of cooling, and 4 days being the standard for, by then you've either been able to refill that tank or you've got some other capacity to manage what you're going through out there. But it's 60 to 80 years of reliable emission-free baseload power. It is, people ask me, if you had to do it all over again, would you do it? Perfect backward-looking information. And my answer towards the end of the project was, even with the success we had with them and the ability to put it into our rates and smoothing and all that, it was hell. And I mean, if you would have said back in the day, it's, starting off with a budget of $4.2 billion and it comes in at $8.1 billion, expecting it to come on in 2016, 2017, and it comes on in 2023, 2024, your answer had to have been hell no. You wouldn't do that. But as you look at 60 to 80 years, I mean, we kind of felt the same way about Vogtle 1 and 2 and Hatch 1 and 2 when we completed those in the 80s. We couldn't believe how much they cost to build, and now they're the best performing units, the base anchor units of our portfolio. So I think time heals all wounds, and over time, I think we're going to like this asset more and more. We are able to say with Vogtle coming in that about 45% of our generation is emission-free in Georgia, and we think that's a powerful statement. We do that without mandates. We do that without the upcoming federal regulations that they're trying to shove down our throat. We do it because we think it's the right thing, and so we are very much of in Georgia, kind of a hands-off state. Leave us alone, and we always do the right thing, very staunchly against the EPA regulations and other forms of mandates. We don't have a single energy mandate in the state of Georgia. So that is our experience in terms of building these units. I would just say, once again, kind of my key takeaways are they're performing exceptionally well, but they come at a hell of a price. Let's hope that we can be more efficient in terms of the next generation that we build. It's sad that the next couple of these units are not being built in the United States. All of these people left this site and went to Poland, Ukraine, and other parts in Europe, because they're learning the lessons of Vogtle 3 and 4, not us here in the United States. There's no project underway of similar size, scale, and to me, and I think that's a shame. I think Poland and these other parts of the world are going to benefit from that. So I can see by the clock I am 5 minutes ahead of time, so I guess I've got time for questions if anybody has any.
At this point in time, how much extra generation, since these units been brought online, do you have?
What's funny, and you're not going to believe this, but after these units came on time, we did some planning with our members, and we are short. And the members have already approved us to build another 1,200 megawatt combined cycle and 250 megawatts of CTs. So we thought after Vogtle we were going to go into quiet time. We just announced a $1.8 to $2 billion capital program because our members need these assets in 28, 29. So we're growing. We're growing organically, and we are also obviously seeing the data centers come in. And I will say for these projects that I just said, that is without any data center whale being landed. We get those data center whales, and there's going to be more. So we needed Vogtle, and we need more.
Do you have a sense of what drove these overruns? And are we that bad at estimating, or was the scope constantly changing?
I think we were naive at the start to feel that this was as cookie cutter as it was. And I'll give you a good example. To install a valve, I mean, we're installing thousands of valves at this site. Bechtel is a worldwide construction operation, probably the best known, most respected The COO of Bechtel came to the site to watch valve installations because he could not understand why it took so long to install the valves at Vogtle versus anything he's ever seen in his career. And he came down and he said, my God, it's a nuclear project. Valves at other sites that we have, manufacturing, refining, things like that, they may have 1 or 2 digital sensors coming in there. Every valve down here requires 6 or 7. The complexity of putting in the wiring, everything at a nuclear plant is 10 times the complexity of any other. Shaw was wondering when they did the protection around the reactor vessel, it's a shield panel of about 2 inches of steel, 3 feet of concrete, 2 inches of steel in panels that they said would be welded in like a glove. It would be seamless and it would wrap around, and a plane or a missile hitting it would disintegrate. Well, the NRC said, that's great, go build that. Well, Shaw brings the panels out and doesn't realize they have to be within 1/16 of an inch tolerance to the one next to it to fit like a, they're like, we're just used to pounding these things in, grinding them in, you know, and NRC said, no, you said they would fit to within a 1/16 tolerance. And they said, what do you expect us to do? And they said, take that panel that doesn't fit and go back and refurbish another one. So and then even further, so you've got all this quality control that you need to have. I am somewhat, and I'm going to be very careful here, I was disappointed in the quality of the work effort provided by the typical union worker when you've got 7,000 people at a site. I think there's a lot of people that will look for the opportunity. If I can hide, I'm going to hide. We're not our parents' generation of workforce. I hate to say that, but that was a takeaway that I had as well. We're not our parents' generation of workforce.
So Mike, I just have one, I'm right here. Just one question for you. Second time I've heard this presentation, but and learned a little bit new each time, but I want to thank you for being here, first of all. You know, when I first heard the story, you know, this is kind of a little bit of a story about either how to or how not to build a nuclear power plant, but it's also a story about how to leverage political engagement. It's about how to leverage your membership, how to build relationships.
Right.
And there's more than just how to build a power plant here.
To me, I cannot overemphasize one of the most valuable people in this game was the person who works government relations for me, who took it upon herself to say, you're not going to be embarrassed by the governor again. You're not going to be called out by the governor again. Who worked all of those relationships and has all of those relationships and worked them aggressively. And you may ask, how do we know that story about Tom Fanning being pulled over and told you're bleeping it up? His chief of staff is best friends with my government relations person and told her this is the God's honest truth as to why they called you and said they're moving forward. He said, I was there when Senator Isaacson made the call. I heard the dialogue. So and our lawyer putting in those project adverse events. She's like, okay, we got to continue forward and you've got us against the wall. You don't mind if we put these project adverse events in and ask for another vote down the road? And they're like, sure, ask for another vote down the road. You're going to get smashed again. And so she put them in and we held them. And their people were questioning why and how did those ever get into this revised contract? But they did.
Yeah, well, looks like we have one more question.
Mike, can you speak on how the environmentalists, such as the Sierra Club, treat your facilities, these facilities?
Can I say we don't care? I'm for everything, all arrows in the quiver. I mean, we've got solar, we've got a pump storage hydro, We have nuclear. Nobody's sweated and suffered over adding carbon-free than we have, but at the same time, we're adding natural gas because you know what? We're not going to have our members sitting in the freezing in the dark or in the winter and boiling in the summer, and we can't add enough solar to keep it going. So we're building natural gas, and if they want to come after us, the EPA wants to come after us with these new rules and say you can't run it more than 40%. We've got a political climate down in Georgia says if we need to run it in the winter, come down here and tell us we can't run new state-of-the-art gas and keep these lights on. We're going to do it. We call it raising the pirate flag. It's just, so we feel like we're doing all the right things, and we can be that snippet and that aggressive when the Sierra Club comes in and tries to snipe at us. We just don't take it.
Mike, thank you very much.
Thanks,
Let's give Mike
appreciate it.
a round of applause, please.